Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into some incredibly powerful source material that completely flips the script on what leadership looks like. As you'll see, these texts reveal that some of the most extraordinary historical and biblical heroes were actually, well, just ordinary teenagers.
You know, when we flip through these ancient historical texts, our minds naturally gravitate toward a very specific image, right? We tend to picture wise elders with decades of life experience, or maybe battle-hardened warriors. We rarely picture youth. But the source material asks us to pause and consider a really profound what if. What if the greatest acts of courage were actually performed by young people who simply chose to trust, right when everyone else was backing down?
Because these texts reveal a massive paradigm shift, it's wild. Instead of the expected heroes, the powerful kings and heavily armed warriors, the narratives consistently show God bypassing the strongest, wealthiest, and most experienced adults. Instead, the chosen leaders are shepherds, captives, and young women. The texts consistently highlight underestimated young people who didn't rely on their own might, but simply trusted.
Let's kick things off with probably the most famous example from these accounts, David. Long before he became Israel's greatest king, David was literally just a teenage shepherd. While his older brothers were off training as seasoned soldiers, David was out in the fields, spending long, quiet days caring for sheep. In fact, the historical texts note he was only at the battlefield to deliver bread and cheese to his older brothers. Seriously, absolutely no one expected the errand boy delivering cheese to become a national hero.
40 days. Just let that sink in for a second. For 40 long days, a giant warrior named Goliath stood before the armies of Israel and just mocked them. 40 days of relentless intimidation. And this wasn't just a minor threat. The text describes how it completely paralyzed experienced, highly trained warriors and even terrified King Saul himself.
I mean, imagine being a teenager just standing on the sidelines watching fully grown adults retreat in absolute terror. David could have easily stayed silent, but instead, he steps forward. He didn't have any military training, but he remembered how he was protected from lions and bears out in the pasture. Armed with just a sling and 5 stones, he faced the giant. It perfectly illustrates a core theme of these texts. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is trusting God enough to move forward despite the fear.
But here's something I found absolutely fascinating in the sources. Bravery isn't always loud, and it isn't always fought on a literal battlefield. And that brings us to 17-year-old Joseph, whose story is basically a masterclass in a very specific type of resilience, quiet courage, in the face of overwhelming injustice. Joseph's journey in this text is just staggering. First off, he is betrayed by his own brothers and sold into slavery, instantly stripped of his home and his family. Then, despite maintaining his absolute integrity, he's falsely accused and thrown into a foreign prison. Now, most people would become deeply bitter after losing everything so unfairly. But Joseph? He quietly maintained his faithfulness, which eventually led to him being elevated as second in command of Egypt, where he used his wisdom to stop a massive famine and literally save entire nations.
Okay, let's shift gears to Daniel. Picture this, a teenage captive taken far away from absolutely everything familiar and dropped right into the heart of Babylon. He was completely surrounded by a dominant empire that was aggressively demanding he change everything: his diet, his education, even his name. The pressure to conform, to just blend in, and to abandon his values was enormous.
But here's the thing. Instead of caving, Daniel respectfully held his ground. And the account proves a super powerful point here. Character is formed long before public victories happen. By making those small, faithful decisions as a teenager, Daniel was building the unwavering foundation that would, years later, give him the strength to survive being thrown into a literal den of lions. The preparation happened in the quiet moments of his youth. Then the texts give us the story of 3 young men who took this cultural pressure to the absolute extreme: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were likely just teenagers when King Nebuchadnezzar issued a truly terrifying ultimatum. The law was simple: bow down and worship a massive, absurdly large 90-foot golden statue, or be thrown alive into a blazing furnace.
Human nature is pretty stark here, right? Most people, completely gripped by the fear of a horrific death, just bowed. But these 3 teens stood tall. They boldly declared to the most powerful man on earth that even if they weren't rescued, they would never bow. And the source tells us that when they were thrown into the fire, a miraculous 4th figure appeared beside them, and they walked out without even the smell of smoke on their clothes. Unbelievable.
You know, courage also means stepping out into massive, unknown callings. The text highlights two remarkable young women who risked absolutely everything for a purpose greater than themselves, Esther and Mary. Their stories really show us the profound impact of female leadership in these historical accounts.
Let's look at Esther first. Historians actually believe she was just in her late teens when she became queen of Persia. When a plot was uncovered to exterminate all of her people, she had a brutal choice to make. Remaining silent would protect her comfortable royal position, but speaking up meant risking her life by approaching the king uninvited. Yet she chose courage, uttering those famous, chilling words, "If I perish, I perish." She risked the whole shebang for those who couldn't defend themselves.
And similarly, scholars point out that Mary was likely just a teenager too when the angel Gabriel appeared to her. I mean, imagine receiving the message that you were going to carry the Son of God. It was a message that instantly threatened her social reputation, invited deep misunderstanding from her community, and permanently changed the trajectory of her entire future. Yet, despite the massive uncertainty of what lay ahead, she courageously said yes to the completely unexpected.
Finally, let's talk about Timothy. He was this young leader in the early Christian church, and man, he faced some intense criticism. But the pushback he received wasn't about his character at all. He faced pressure purely because he lacked age and decades of experience. People were actively underestimating him just because he was young.
So, to counter that exact criticism, the Apostle Paul gave him this unforgettable piece of advice. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. It's such a definitive statement from the text, proving that perceived worldly experience does not determine historical or spiritual impact. Your faith does. Paul basically told Timothy to lead by example in literally every single aspect of his life, through his speech, his daily conduct, his love, his faith, and his purity. And when you look at all these young figures together, a really striking pattern emerges from the sources. None of them felt fully prepared, and none of them had unlimited resources. They didn't even know how their stories would end. Yet they stepped up to lead by actively choosing faith over fear. So, bringing it all together, why does all of this ancient history matter for us right now? It matters because the core human experience hasn't changed a bit. Every single generation faces its own version of a Goliath on the battlefield, or a fiery furnace, or a lion's den.
Because today we're facing our own modern giants. The names and faces of the threats have changed for sure. Now it's fear, anxiety, loneliness, systemic injustice, temptation, or deep uncertainty about the future. But make no mistake, navigating these things requires the exact same level of extraordinary courage from young hearts today as it did thousands of years ago.
So, I really want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today. The question isn't whether you are old enough, or experienced enough, or wealthy enough. The real question is, are you willing to take the first courageous step? Because, as these sources beautifully remind us, history is, and always has been, changed by ordinary people with extraordinary faith. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep stepping forward with courage.